From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, eliminating right to abortion in United States. Biden likely to raise human rights issues concerning Muslims with Modi. Who starts discussions on declaring monkeypox global emergency? Over 280 million people used drugs globally in 2020, says UN. Jerusalem Islamic Waqf warns about Israel's excavations around Al-Aqsa Mosque. Our top story tonight. The U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade Friday, eliminating the right to abortion. The ruling upended a precedent set nearly 50 years ago in the landmark case. The ruling in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization was issued along ideological lines, with the court's 3 liberal justices in opposition. Conservative Justice Samuel Alito wrote the majority opinion. More than half of the states are expected to respond to the decision by enacting total abortion bans. On Thursday, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a New York state law limiting the carrying of concealed weapons. It's a crime to possess a firearm without a license in New York, whether inside or outside the home. People who obtain a license to have and carry guns are required to show proper cause. The court ruled in a 6-3 vote that the requirement violates the constitutional right to carry guns. New York State issues public carry licenses only when an applicant demonstrates a special need for self-defense. The court concluded the state's licensing regime violates the Constitution, wrote Justice Clarence Thomas. The U.S. House Committee investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol revealed half a dozen Republican lawmakers sought preemptive pardons from then-President Donald Trump. The lawmakers sought the pardons after trying to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. Representative Mo Brooks of Alabama emailed the White House 5 days after the deadly insurrection requesting preemptive pardons for himself and Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida. He also sought pardons for every congressman or senator who voted to reject the Electoral College vote submissions of Arizona and Pennsylvania. Cassidy Hutchinson, a former aide to the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, said in a video deposition that Gaetz asked for blanket pardons in early December 2020. In related news, former President Donald Trump's plan to overturn the 2020 election by installing a loyalist to head the Justice Department would have led to mass resignations. That's according to a testimony of former department leaders Thursday on Capitol Hill. The former officials appeared before the House panel investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen, his deputy Richard Donahue, and Stephen Engel, the House of the Office of Legal Counsel, testified before the panel. They described weeks of chaos inside the Trump White House as the president scrambled to reverse his electoral defeat. Trump's frustration grew when they could not help him do it, they said. U.S. President Joe Biden may raise human rights issues concerning Muslims with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre said. The two leaders will speak during the launch of the Middle East Quad in Israel next month. Jean-Pierre said Biden is a straight shooter and has no problem talking to leaders about humanitarian rights, freedoms, and the importance of democracy. She was responding to a reporter's question on Wednesday who asked if Biden would speak with Modi about the demolition of houses of some Muslims linked to protests. Jean-Pierre clarified she doesn't know what is on the agenda for the leaders' meeting. Protests have broken out across India over Islamophobic statements made by members of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party officials. Indian media organizations are upset over a resolution sponsored by the U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar, which calls for designating India as a country of particular concern for violating religious freedom. A headline in the Hindustan Times newspaper read, Ilhan Omar spews anti-India hate, moves resolution in US Congress. A majority of Indian papers called it an anti-India resolution. It is co-sponsored by Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and Juan Vargas. The resolution urges the Biden administration to implement the recommendations of the bipartisan U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. The commission has called for designating India as a country of particular concern for 3 consecutive years. The resolution was introduced in the House of Representatives Tuesday and has been sent to the House Foreign Affairs Committee for necessary action. A special report found an alarming deficiency in the distribution of critical resources, including a protective justice system and mental health support for Kashmiri children. The forum includes Justice A.P. Shah, former Chief Justice of Madras and Delhi High Courts, Gopal Pillai, former Government of India Home Secretary, and other judges, activists, and lawyers. It highlighted violations of human and child rights in the Union Territory. The forum is an independent initiative that focuses on continuing human rights violations in the region. The report cites real-life case studies of teenagers and minors who are harassed, picked up for questioning, and illegally detained in violations of the Juvenile Justice Act. Children as young as 18 months old have been targeted by security forces, per the report. According to the UN, over 280 million people used drugs globally in the year 2020. Details after the break. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. Than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Assalamu alaikum! Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever-popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe, and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's world. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah, let's explore.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. More than 280 million people used drugs worldwide in 2020, the head of the UN Drugs Agency said Thursday. Ghada Fatih Wali, Director General of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, said drug trafficking is also increasing. The message was released ahead of International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking on June 26th. Wali said there are serious problems in accessing necessary support for people using drugs and who need treatment. Access has also been hampered for several reasons, mainly the COVID-19 pandemic and instability in Ukraine, Afghanistan, and the continent of Africa. She also noted that there is an increase in the types of synthetic drugs worldwide. A special committee of the World Health Organization began meeting Thursday to decide whether monkeypox should be declared a global public health emergency. The emergency committee will advise the WHO chief on whether the event constitutes a public health emergency of international concern, the WHO's highest alert level. Cases of the virus are surging across Europe. Since early May, cases of monkeypox have been reported in countries where the disease is not endemic, as well as in several nations where it is, the WHO reported. The agency said over 2,700 cases of monkeypox have been identified by June 21 in 29 countries and areas throughout the European region. On Thursday, the Jerusalem Islamic Waqf warned about excavations and works carried out by Israel around the Al-Aqsa Masjid. The Waqf has been monitoring excavations and suspicious and covert actions carried out by Israel's Antiquity Authority and the Israeli settler group Ilhan. Excavations are ongoing in the areas around Al-Buraq Wall, which Jews refer to as the Western Wall, and the Umayyad palaces. Crews have been working with bulldozers and excavation machines, especially in the south and west directions next to Masjid al-Aqsa. The Waqf warned against damaging, destroying, and changing the historical and religious characteristics of historical places. Al-Aqsa Mosque and foundations in Jerusalem are legally under the auspices of Jordan's Jerusalem Islamic Foundations Administration. The Waqf called on Jordanian King Abdullah II to intervene in the situation. On Thursday, an Iranian court ordered the United States to pay $4.3 billion in compensation for the killing of the country's nuclear scientists. Iran blames Israel, a major U.S. ally, for the assassination of a number of Iranian nuclear scientists in recent years. Israel committed the crime of assassinating nuclear experts in violation of international obligations, the 55th Civil Court of Tehran said. It ordered the U.S. government, institutions, and officials who supported Israel to pay $4.3 billion in pecuniary and non-pecuniary damages. The Human Rights Division of the Iranian judiciary said Thursday's verdict was issued in response to a lawsuit filed by the families of some of the slain scientists. Young Bangladeshis, who make up about 40% of the South Asian country's population, are leaving in droves for greener pastures. Brain drain is responsible for the exodus of academics, doctors, engineers, and skilled labor. It has limited the country's capacity for growth, experts say. UNESCO reported 70,000 to 90,000 Bangladeshi students travel overseas for higher education every year. The U.S. gave study permits to over 8,500 Bangladeshis last year, a threefold increase since 2009. Dil Afroza Begum's acting chairman of University Grant Commission said lack of opportunities for research at universities is driving away youth. The regulatory body of higher education said there are no modern scientific labs in Bangladesh for conducting higher research at universities. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at our in-depth analysis segment.
President Biden and the Secretary of Justice together visited New York and to deal and discuss strategies to fight gun violence. New York mayor who used to be a NYPD, New York's police department's captain. He joined them and he agreed with the president. Actually, he said, Mr. President, Eric Adams is reporting for duty and ready to serve. So what can he do? Can we stop the gun violence? It's a part of America now. Will it be possible? And what are the things he could do? We have someone who studies these things, a professor of law and the director of criminal juvenile justice and racial justice clinical program at the University of San Francisco School of Law, Professor Lara Bazelon. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us what these people can do. I mean, it seems that the mayor and the Secretary of Justice, as well as President, are together on this.
Well, they have their work cut out for them for a number of reasons. As you know, gun rights have expanded in the United States with this conservative majority in the Supreme Court, and they seem poised to strike down some laws that had allowed states like New York to have tighter gun restrictions. What they're saying they're going to do, the Biden-Adams partnership, is crack down on something called the Iron Corridor. And that is actually the I-95 freeway, which runs north to south and is basically accused of being a conduit for illegal firearms coming into states like New York and Massachusetts from states in the South, which have more permissive regulations, or some would say lack of regulations around firearms. So that's one thing they're trying to do. Another thing they're trying to do is pump more money into police departments, state, local, and federal. But I think critics on the left would say that the police already have plenty of money. And as you point out, this gun problem seems to be getting worse, not better. And in part, that's because in the United States, there are more guns than there are people. And the laws around gun ownership are getting more permissive rather than more restrictive.
Well, that was interesting to note that President Biden wanted to throw $500 million at it. Was the absence of money the real problem, which he's trying to fix by providing more money?
I don't think so, honestly. I think that the idea that throwing money at this problem is going to fix it is really not very well grounded, because as you probably are aware, law enforcement in the United States is not lacking for money. The problem isn't that their budgets aren't full. The problem is that the laws that exist allow most Americans to own a firearm, in fact, multiple firearms. And because of the kind of commerce of guns and the number of guns, it's also very easy for the people who aren't supposed to have them to get their hands on them.
What President Biden, I mean, he has been president for a year now. What has he done in reference to gun violence, which he will plan to do now?
Well, he has talked a lot about how it's a major problem. Of course, President Obama did the same, and numerous presidents before them have. And really, basically, as far as I can tell, it is a lot of talk. I'm not really sure that he's been able to put some kind of a federal program in place or really encourage super innovative thinking by states and localities around this issue. I mean, one area where there has been progress is the so-called ghost guns and trying to crack down on the people who manufacture them and prosecute those people, because of course those guns are not legal. But I think that there's just a greater problem, which is partly about our laws and partly about our culture.
Would you think the culture is dictating laws here?
I'm sorry?
Do you think culture is dictating laws?
I think it's a chicken and the egg kind of issue. I think Americans have always loved their guns. I think until recently, there wasn't a lot of case law interpreting the so-called right to bear arms in the Second Amendment. We have a court now, the Supreme Court, that is inclined to interpret that very, very permissively, and really to discourage states from trying to impose restrictions like requiring people to have a license or requiring people to not carry guns within a certain number of feet of a certain kind of place. You know, we have states where people are bringing guns to church, they're bringing guns to school, they're bringing guns to the supermarket, they're bringing guns to bars. And in a lot of states, that's perfectly legal. And I don't see our government being able to really do anything about that.
President is also calling on a ban on assault weapons. Is that a statement or is that a strategy which has not been talked about before?
Well, as your listeners may or may not know, we did have a federal ban on assault weapons, and that was put into place in the 1990s. And then it sunsetted that provision, and Congress didn't take that legislation up again. And so we're now in a situation where there really isn't any federal legislation around this question. I think many people would welcome a ban on assault weapons, since it's not really clear to me what a regular citizen needs out of an assault weapon. And of course, they're extremely lethal and dangerous. But I think that's really about getting the votes in Congress to revive that bill. And given the power of the gun lobby and given the sentiment in this country toward gun ownership, I'm not sure that there's the political will or the votes to do that.
Well, there were votes and political votes and all that during the Obama administration. He had the House and the Senate and himself as president. They didn't do much in terms of gun laws. So what is the problem with this?
The basic problem is a resistance to changing the law. And it's really interesting because President Obama's best chance to tighten gun restrictions came after the horrible massacre at Sandy Hook, where 20 children were murdered by a deranged gunman. And that was really this big opportunity to at least have background checks be beefed up, to have certain kinds of gun manufacturers be subject to stricter regulations. And actually, you know, it's interesting that legislation polled very, very well. I mean, it was like at a 90% approval rate by the public. And yet, because the gun lobby was so powerful, and I think they have a hold over many of our elected officials, that bill never made it to the floor, much less passed into law. And I feel like if we can't do anything in the wake of our own children being massacred in kindergarten and first grade, I'm not really sure what the prognosis is other than grim.
You know, you as a professor study that and you teach that. So can you and your students come up with some solution to this nightmare?
That's a great question. I feel like one of the things that keeps me engaged with my job is hoping for a better future for my students. I'm not sure we've handed them such a great situation in so many ways. And yet I feel that my students are idealistic and optimistic and energetic. And also, I mean, in California, where I live and I work and I teach, we do have relatively restrictive gun laws. Now we'll see what the Supreme Court does with a case that's pending in New York that would have a huge impact on us. But I do think sometimes when I feel despairing, I look at my state, and you can say what you want about some problems with California, wildfires, droughts, a potential earthquake at any moment, but we are trying our best to do innovative things when it comes to things like criminal justice reform. And so when I think about my students going out into the world and going to states like mine and other states and spreading those ideas, it does make me feel a little more hopeful.
Now, Eric Adams, mayor of New York, where President and the Secretary of Justice joined him, he clearly wanted more policing when he was running for office, unlike other candidates, and it's not considered quote unquote progressive. Do you think his background being a police officer, he can make anything to make New York City safer with less guns and less violence?
I think he has a real mandate from the voters, and he's a really interesting combination of qualities in that, you know, he's a former NYPD officer, but he's also somebody who was racially profiled and actually beaten by the police. He strongly identifies as a Democrat, but he doesn't want to get pulled too far to the left. And I feel like given all of those interesting mixture of qualities and attributes, he has kind of a bully pulpit right now, especially in the honeymoon phase of taking over as mayor of New York. And so it may be that he's able to do some things both at the state level and advocating nationwide as the mayor of one of the most prominent cities. I feel like the jury is out, though, because, he's so new to this office. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, if a mayor of New York can do a few things, what about the executive orders presidents have? Are there some executive orders which could be crafted in a way that, there's more peace on our streets?
That's an interesting question. You're absolutely right that presidents in our country can exercise authority through executive orders. What's tricky here is that, of course, they're checked. They're checked by the Constitution. And right now we have a court that is interpreting the Second Amendment, specifically around the right to bear arms and own guns, in a way that were President Biden to issue an executive order, he'd have to be careful not to run afoul of.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Bazelon, for your time and for your insight.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.